I'm Hope Witkowsky of Senior Scene. Today, we're going to look at an illness that affects 6 million Americans every day, hoarding. Now, you may think that hoarders are only seniors, but you'd be totally wrong because young people can be hoarders also. We're going to look on what is the outcome of hoarding to your health and safety of you and those around you. I hope today's show gives you enough interesting ideas on how you can help the hoarder. In our promise of anonymity, we can't tell you this woman's name, but we can tell you her history. While she no longer lives in Torrance, her mother still does, and she's afraid of the stigma that will come with her viewers knowing who her family is and what her mother has become.
There was 3 kids, the parents. We lived here our whole entire life. I came when I was 1. My sister was born into this house, and my brother was born into this house. My mom worked. We went on vacations. We had dirt bikes, motorcycles, boats. You know, we were a camping family, if you will. We used to go to Knott's Berry Farm for a loaf of bread. I mean, she would make little jaunts out of anything. We had a wonderful life.
That wonderful life took a turn for the worse when the few life-changing events happened. In 1998, her stepfather died, leaving her mother a widow at an early age. She was then forced into retirement because of a downsizing of companies. Her mother then began drinking heavily. A divorced mother of 2 herself, she then moved in with her mother, hoping to ease the loneliness. Little did she realize what changes were happening to her mother all the while.
When I look back, it's like I wouldn't call it signs of hoarding, but certainly issues. I mean, we had the garage was like a little, mini. When we ran out of ketchup, we'd come out in the garage and get one. And there used to be 2 or 3. Then she started later when she was alone buying all the store had. There was 30 bottles of ketchup in the garage now, where that started about 10, 15 years ago.
Little did she know her mother was showing signs of hoarding, a mental illness that affects thousands of people all over the United States.
We'd be coming into town and she'd say, "I'll meet you down at Acapulco." And we didn't think anything of that. It's like, okay, great. So she was already devising ways of keeping people out. And we kind of got going, it's weird that we can't go in the house. Even when we'd come over, she would just stand in the backyard and talk to us. And it's like, and so I started making up this, "Oh, Mom, I got to make a pit stop." And I'd go in, and that 7 years ago when I started seeing it, and I just looked at her and I said, "What are you doing?" Because there were bags everywhere. The path was still there. You could still see some floor. And she doesn't like, that's when she started backing away from me and keeping me out. Because, I was like questioning. And then she got actually hostile, even with me and my brother.
She and her brother knew that something had to be done to help their mother. They both lived hours away and knew that their mother's life was at stake if they didn't find help for her.
I actually first called Adult Protective Services because I went down to the beach and sat in my car for an hour just contemplating going, because I want to do everything right. So I called Los Angeles County. And, set that up that, okay, they need to come out. And this was 7 years ago that I first did that. So they were setting up, they wanted to set up interviews and whatnot, which she wouldn't even let us in the house. She had the locks changed, wouldn't give anybody keys. Now, meanwhile, unbeknownst to us, the fire department and the police department, they knew, because she had gotten citations, she had gotten write-ups. But we actually, I think we called in mental health, adult protective services, fire department, environmental, and animal control. When I decided just to let the hammer fall, I called all 5 agencies, and that's when we met Rochelle.
Things didn't go easy for the professionals who were called in to help.
She said get off her property. She's going to... She actually threatened the police or the fire people with firearms, which that tells you right there how mental she is, because she's like, okay, this is my property, and by golly, no one's going to do anything, this is my say, which she's always been real strong about that. So that's when we just couldn't get in. And then when we would end up muscling our way in, because we've called, the police actually told me, get a locksmith. But meanwhile, they have to tell me to leave or they have to arrest me because she's in the house yelling, throw her in jail.
The children began to notice drastic changes about their mother's physical and mental health when they would come to visit.
She quit showering. You couldn't even get to the bathtub for the last 7 years, but she also hadn't washed her hair in what the doctor said was probably 3 years. She's right now going to a podiatrist because her feet were so infected, her toenails were so long and growing back into the skin of the other toes and very infected. Just they don't take care of themselves. And I don't know, I mean, and I know it's not the store's problems, but when you see a person that's got dirty clothes on, soiled, incontinent, soiled clothes, and you're buying 16 bottles of barbecue sauce, why wouldn't the clerk say, wow, I'm sure they do, but I just think, there should be more awareness because these people need help, and they won't ask for it and they won't take it.
With her mother on the verge of death, she knew she had to take extreme measures.
When we came in January to check on her, we told her ahead of time, if you don't answer the door, we are calling the police, we will get in. Because she doesn't answer, and we were afraid she's dead, getting eaten up by all the cockroaches and spiders. So we came to check. We gave her 5 minutes, gave her the last call, said, okay, I'm calling 911. She came to the door, and she was very weak and frail and just sick. And so once we get our foot in the door and we can strong arm her where she can't close it and lock it up again, we can do that. But we can't stay in the house for very long because of the fumes. I mean, we actually were getting burns on our faces, like sunburns, just from the chemicals. It just was terrible. And so we told her we were going to take her to dinner because she loves to go out to eat. So we took her to the hospital, which this is our big joke, is it was a 5-hour wait for that restaurant. You hear hospitals have good food, right? So she kind of knew she was at the hospital, but we kept teasing her going, no, it's worth the wait. This is a great restaurant, Mom. And then she went in and they said, you just saved her life.
The signs of hoarding aren't always on display to see in plain sight, especially in beautiful neighborhoods in Torrance. You never know what's lurking behind some of these walls.
It needs some maintenance. It could stand to get painted, but as you can see, it looks like every other house in the neighborhood. You would never know what was on the inside from the outside, which I hear is what a typical hoarding situation is that they keep the outside looking good so they can get away with what's on the inside, because they have it all figured out.
Even now, 3 months later, the daughter still needs to put on protective gear before entering her mother's home. We're going to take a short break, but when we return, we're going to hear from those specialists who are helping our hoarders.
114th Infantry Company, Iraq.
The memories are all blurred.
I don't know what's wrong with me.
The words, they're hard to find.
I came back a different person.
I wonder if she's better off without me.
You just feel alone.
You gave all to the cause of freedom. Now it's our turn to give our all to you. It's free and totally confidential. Reach us at operationnotforgotten.com. We are here.
She passed away about 6 months ago. It was really hard to learn that there was no cure. So we sought hospice care. The hospice people, they really helped. They made her feel comfortable. And they helped me and the girls, especially the girls. They're helping us get through this loss. Hospice people, they're good people. They're really good people.
Welcome back. Now we're going to visit those specialists who help the hoarders and their families. Rochelle Maurer is the Torrance Fire Department's fire prevention specialist. One of her tasks is to identify hoarders in the community based on complaints that come to the fire department by neighbors, friends, or family. If the home is a fire or safety threat, the owner will receive a citation and a deadline to improve the infraction. A team of social workers, fire prevention, and organizers work with the hoarder until all safety threats are greatly improved.
Firefighter safety is a real passion of mine. So part of my job when I'm working with the hoarders is to ensure that when I am working with the hoarder, I share with them, that operationally, if firefighters come in, they're not going to have the walls to be able to use as a beacon, if you will, because there's so much stuff. They can get lost, and if they use the hose lines for maybe a way to get out, well, if debris falls on top of the hoses, again, the firefighters can be trapped.
Maurer's fire department job can be dangerous at times.
Removing a hoarder from their home is absolutely extremely rare case. My goal, and the goal of our team, working again with mental health, is to bring harm reduction to that home, stabilize an individual, whether it's stabilizing, reducing the fire hazards, stabilizing them through physically or mental, emotional health, well-being. And by me, even with the intent, the upfront intent saying, well, if you don't do this, we're going to take away your home, I've pretty much lost any ground I may have had before. So my job is to lay out the fire hazard situation. And it's not just the hoarder. I have a responsibility to their neighbors and the men and women I work with, my firefighters, my cops. Firefighters have been known to die in hoarding situations. And cops are known to, if there is a fire, they've gone into homes and they're not even protected. Well, if they go into a hoarding home, they can get trapped in there and die. And so I have a responsibility to them as well. So I lay it out with the hoarder and say, this is what I see, and this is what we need to do to reduce the harm. How do we do that? And then it's an incremental time. Now, if after 6 months I have gotten no response or no progress, even with mental health intervention, then I have to ramp it up. Then I'll say, okay, I'm going to give you a final notice, and if you're not going to even do this. And if they still don't comply with that final notice, even again with that team approach, then it goes to a criminal complaint.
When the fire department determines that a teamwork approach is necessary, they contact the county for a licensed clinical social worker to join their efforts.
We'll come out and do an assessment. Our assessment includes a medical evaluation and a psychosocial evaluation to determine what, if any, mental health diagnoses exist, what, if any, medical diagnoses exist, and then from there we'll develop a treatment plan with the client always, but with also the understanding of the needs of the Torrance Fire Department in satisfying whatever issues of safety and the communal environment is involved.
Even a trained clinical social worker doesn't always get instant acceptance by the hoarder for many, many visits.
The majority of the clients are what we call unwilling. They haven't come to us for services. Torrance Fire Department has gone to them and outlined a problem. So what we look at is increasing safety. So one of the things that we begin with is being able to open the door all the way. A lot of clients are unable to open their door but a crack to squeeze themselves in and out, which is a hazard just in itself in case any fire personnel needed to come inside to save them in the event of a fire or another medical emergency. So the first goal is to get the door to open all the way, which means removing everything behind it. Our second goal would be to make 3-foot pathways throughout the house to every door and every window. The reason for that is so that a gurney can be brought in.
So how does someone get classified as a hoarder?
With hoarding comes a range of medical conditions that can either come up from the hoarding or be exacerbated by the hoarding. So if you're collecting cats, for instance, and the cats are not completely using the the litter box and they're spraying around the house, you're going to have an accumulation of ammonia, which can lead to respiratory issues, asthma, increased allergies. With the amount of stuff in the house, the pathways become smaller. That increases the risk of fall. As you become older, a fall can actually lead to death. If you break a hip, or if you fall and you're not able to get to a telephone, you may end up lying there for 3 days. You may end up starving or becoming increasingly dehydrated. So those are all risks to the person's health.
Compulsive hoarding is considered by many researchers to be a type of obsessive-compulsive disorder. They feel very anxious or upset when they have to make a decision about discarding things. Researchers have guessed that about 1% of the population in the United States suffers from compulsive hoarding, but the actual number may be much higher.
Sometimes what ends up happening is the spaces in the home become unusable. So if you see a kitchen where, the faucet is the only thing that shows that the stove is completely covered with stuff, the person probably isn't using that kitchen anymore. It's become unusable. So all of their meals are having to be eaten outside, either in restaurants or at local convenience stores. And actually that becomes a burden both on the client's health and on their situation, aside from just the cost of eating out all the time. But one of the problems that we see that brings hoarding into the pathological spectrum is when the home can no longer be used as a home and rather just a storage unit.
The woman featured earlier in our show says she really appreciated the work of this team to help her protect her mother from the possible death from living this lifestyle.
Well, it's been my pleasure to help, and it does take a team effort. It's really rare that a family member will step up and has that fortitude to continue on, because it is very stressful, as you know.
Yes. Well, that's what I find hard to believe, is that family members don't step up. And you've said that before, and it's like, I don't know why you wouldn't, but that is how it is.
Yeah, and I think some of them, they just get tired. They have families of their own, and they just get tired, and they just don't know what to do, so they quit. And that's why it's important that you and your brother kind of work together and kind of shoulder the responsibility. And working together as a team, relying on myself or someone else, code enforcement, to kind of help pitch in.
Right.
Working together helps alleviate some of those stresses, and it's a sharing of the burden, if you will.
So you may ask, is there any way to tell when someone is going down that path? If it is someone who is important to you, what can you do now before it becomes too late?
Some of the early signs, of course, after just clutter, maybe that the person begins to isolate themselves. So if somebody who becomes recently retired, or who all of a sudden isn't going out to public events any longer, you're noticing that they're staying more and more inside the home with the curtains drawn. You're noticing that stuff begins to pile up against the windows. You'll often see curtains that are pushed against the windows, against the glass. You might begin to start seeing stuff accumulate on the porch or on the back porch. Those would all be signs that the house is beginning to get full on the inside. And you may want to ask the person if they would be willing to talk to a mental health professional and begin some treatment to deal with some of the other symptoms that are leading to this need to collect.
The next team member is an organizer. Dorothy Breininger is a board member of the National Association of Professional Organizers and has appeared on A&E television series Hoarders. She shares her work with us.
What's really interesting when you call in a professional organizer, such as myself, to work with someone who hoards, we work with social workers, we work with the fire department, we work with judges, prosecuting attorneys, estate folks, we work with family members, therapists, just so many folks that I'm kind of like that central wheel. It's not just organizing the hoarder, but organizing all the people, like vector control for animal control. So I'm the clearinghouse for all of that. So there is some repetitiveness, but we need to have all these people on board. There are so many people who were involved in taking care of just one hoarding case.
You can tell by the energy and caring personality of this organizer why the hoarder is put at ease.
When someone calls me and says, my aunt is a hoarder, my dad is a hoarder, the first thing I do is ask them if that person, the hoarder, is interested in talking to me. Chances are they're not. So I try to get some sort of conversation and build trust with the person who hoards. Once I have the trust, then I can go to the home and do an assessment. And the very first thing I do is give them a hug.
It is important for the organizer to have insight on what our social worker is getting the hoarder to accomplish.
I've worked with hoarders for 20 years. And the one thing I can tell you is when you start threatening someone to take away their stuff, they are going to run the other direction and they will not participate with you. So if you want to help someone who hoards, you want to be sure to validate their feelings about their stuff and let them know that you understand that their stuff is important, even though it doesn't look like it to you.
And despite the effort between all these agencies, the results usually do not last long.
The most common question that I get is, Dorothy, do your hoarders go back to hoarding when you're done working with them? And the answer is, A, they either accept ongoing help after I come in, or B, they don't. If they accept help and continue, just like a diet program or a workout or a fitness program, if they continue with the help, the answer is they actually don't go back to the hoarding as severely as they had before. If they do not accept the help, you can be sure that individual goes back to hoarding and it looks just like it did a month later.
These are some wonderful ways to get organized for not just hoarders, but for anyone who has too much stuff and not enough room. Dorothy shows us how a simple hanging file folder can act as a way to put all our catalogs in a hanging method so that we can see at a glance all those favorite magazines.
Now the other thing for paper is a system I call TRAF, T-R-A-F. You have 4 choices for every single piece of paper or any item in your home. So let's take a graduation announcement that comes in. What are you going to do? T, toss it. R, route it. That means give it to a family member. My husband knows that kid. He can decide if he wants to go to that graduation. I'm not. A, act on it. That means, oh yeah, I like that kid. I actually want to go to that graduation. And actually write out a card, make a file folder for it, and act on it, RSVP. Or you can file it and say, you know what, I like this graduation announcement. I don't like the kid, I'm not going, but I'm going to file it and keep it for when my daughter graduates because I like the idea. So TRAF, you have 4 choices for everything: toss, route, act, or file.
Thanks to the organizer in our film, we hope to show the whole family of hoarders how to organize their lives. Now, our fire prevention services want you to know how to start the process for helping the hoarder in your life.
If anybody wants to report what they think might be hoarding conditions, either for a neighbor or even a family member, everything's kept confidential. I approach it very non-judgmental with the individuals I work with. Like I said before, they're people and they have a story. And once I get that story and can kind of see where they're coming from, we truly do work together with our seniors or individuals who have a tendency to hoard. So if the family members are hesitant to call, please have them just call, because I can always talk with them and just say, this is how we can approach it to assuage any concerns that they may have. And they would call our fire prevention office at 310-618-2973. And again, everything is confidential.
I hope today's show informed you about the hazards of hoarding, on your safety, and even fire dangers. I'm Hope Witkowsky reminding you, knowledge, it's a powerful tool. Tune in next time for more secrets on successful aging.